Welcome to the R of reflect, reason. How can we mirror the profound thinking of Jesus? How might worshiping Him deepen our intellectual lives? Now, to answer that question, we're going to spend a couple minutes together in Matthew chapter 22. So let me paint the context. The whole scene happens on the steps of the Jerusalem temple, where Jesus has been cornered by a group called the Sadducees. Now, the way I learned it as a kid is that the Sadducees were sad, you see, because they believed that you die and stay dead. There's no afterlife. And so they are going to confront Jesus on the temple steps to make him look like an idiot in public. That's their goal. And so we're going to watch this epic intellectual showdown between Jesus and the Sadducees. Now, the Sadducees tell a story. They say, Jesus, this woman marries a man, the man drops dead, the brother steps in to marry the widow, he drops dead, next brother steps in, drops dead, all the way down to the seventh brother, and then the woman drops dead. So it's a little bit like a Shakespeare play, right, where everybody's just dead on the stage by the final scene. Now, that story might sound a little strange to 21st century ears, so it's important that we understand what the Sadducees were up to. They are pulling back the steel teeth of a logical trap, and then they're going to set the bait for Jesus with what seems like a harmless question. They ask him, so in the resurrection, who will she be married to? Who will she call sweetheart forever? Now, to appreciate the genius of Jesus' response, we need to take just a minute to appreciate how brilliant the Sadducees' argument was against Jesus. What they've done is built something that philosophers would call a destructive dilemma. Now, the way a destructive dilemma works is that if some idea X is true, then either A or B will also be true, but A and B are both false, therefore X is false. Now, I know that sounds a little bit abstract, so let's fill in the blanks with the Sadducees' actual argument. If there's more to life than this life, then this woman who had 7 consecutive husbands will either A, be married to all 7 forever, or B, she'll be married to one of the 7 forever. Jesus couldn't have answered A or B without sounding like an idiot in public. If he had said A, she'll be married to all 7, he would have violated marriage as a one-man, one-woman, monogamous institution. And if he had said B, she'll be married to one of the 7, then it's totally arbitrary. Which husband? Husband number 1, husband number 4, husband number 7? Do you wear a blindfold and play pin the tail on the dead husband? There's no convincing answer that way either. So since it can't be A, she can't be married to all 7, and it can't be B, she can't be married to one of the 7, therefore there is no afterlife. It's a pretty brilliant argument. So how does Jesus respond? What does a mind that fully loves the Father do when faced with a serious intellectual challenge? Well, let me read to you from Matthew chapter 22. It says this, starting in verse 29. Jesus answered them and said, "Hey, what's that over there?" and ran and hid in a cave. No, Jesus doesn't run away from an intellectual challenge. Let's try that again. Matthew 22. Jesus answered them and said, "How dare you question me? I shall smite thee with a mighty smiting." No, Jesus doesn't bully his audience. Let's give it another shot. Jesus answered them and said, "Just believe. Just close your eyes and take a leap in the dark. Just have faith. Don't ask questions." And he gave him a condescending pat on the forehead. No, Jesus doesn't cop out, Jesus doesn't bully, and Jesus doesn't run away from an intellectual challenge. Here's what the mind of Christ does when faced with a serious challenge. Here's what the text actually says. Matthew 22, verse 29, Jesus answered them, "You are wrong because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels in heaven." Now let me just hit the pause button on the text for 1 minute so we can appreciate the genius of the mind of Christ in action. What Jesus has just done is articulated what philosophers call the tertium quid. It's a Latin phrase that means the third thing. When you're given a false A and a false B, you come up with the true C, which is exactly what Jesus does. She won't be married to all 7 in eternity. She won't be married to one of the 7 in eternity because there is no marriage in eternity. So they've pulled back the teeth on this trap, and in 2 sentences, Jesus walks up and just rips the whole trap in half. Now, what he's going to do in the next 3 sentences is build an argument for an afterlife that leaves the Sadducees blushing and the crowd astonished at his sheer genius. Here's how he does it. He says, "As for the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was said to you by God?" And now he's going to quote from Exodus 3, which says, "I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He's not the God of the dead, but of the living." And with that argument, again, the Sadducees are silenced and the crowd is blown away at the genius of Jesus. So let me break it down for you. Jesus has cited Exodus 3, where God says, "I am the God of," and then he lists 3 dead guys, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now help me out. What's the verb tense in that sentence? God doesn't say "I was." He doesn't say "I will be." He says, "I am the present tense God of 3 dead guys." Follow the logic. If God is the present tense God of 3 dead guys, and God is not the God of the dead but of the living, then Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob must still in some sense be alive. It's just this mind-blowing moment that the crowd is astonished at Jesus' brilliance. And to appreciate that brilliance, let's break it down as a destructive dilemma. Jesus uses the same style argument that was used against him. If X, you die and stay dead, then God could only say he was the past tense God of 3 dead guys, or God is the God of the dead and not the living. But God says, "I am the present tense God of 3 dead guys," and God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Therefore, not X. Therefore, the belief that we die and stay dead is false. Do you see the genius of Jesus in action? I hope I've just turned Jesus a new angle for you to see not only is he loving and compassionate and gracious, he's also brilliant. And if we're worshiping that kind of Jesus, we ourselves will become more logical. We'll be better at spotting bad arguments. We'll be better at building good arguments. Now, that's just one dimension of 9 dimensions of the mind of Christ I get into in the chapter. I also talk about how Jesus has a biblical mind. He builds his entire case off the verb tense of a single word in Exodus 3. So if we're worshiping and becoming like that kind of Jesus, we will get to know the details of Scripture. Jesus also has a worldview-aware mind. He knew what his opponents believed so that he was able to find points of contact to lead them towards truth. He also had a factual mind. Jesus not only proves logically that there's more to life than this life, he proves it factually just a few days later by dying and not staying dead. And so in the chapter, I get into a few more aspects of the mind of Christ. And my prayer for you is that as you dig into this material, you find yourself becoming more truly yourself as you mirror the mind of Christ.